Support for Mission Nonprofit is provided by Thurston Talk.
This program is provided in the public interest by Thurston Community Media. More information at TCMedia.org.
Hi, I'm Robert Kim, and you're watching Mission Nonprofit. Each month, we connect with local organizations and agencies that are making a positive impact in our communities. We've invited Griffith and Gerry Alexander from Olympia Historical Society and Bigelow House Museum to talk about their work. Thanks for joining us, gentlemen.
Our pleasure.
Nice to be here with you,
Yes.
Robert, and with my good friend Greg.
Now, you merged two organizations in like 2013. It was the Olympia Historical Society and the Bigelow House Museum.
It was the Bigelow House Preservation Association.
Okay.
Right.
And so what do you do as an organization?
What do we do? Well, we do a great deal. So we operate the Bigelow House Museum, and our mission there is to preserve and interpret the Bigelow House Museum and the Bigelow family and the house itself to our community. But we also maintain collections of historical artifacts and documents, photographs in our Olympia Historical Society collection. And we also, our mission is really to educate and convey the history of Olympia and the South Sound region, in fact, to our community.
One fascinating thing I read on your website,
Yes.
which is olympiahistory.org,
Yes.
is that the Bigelow House is the oldest in Olympia. The oldest residence is what it said on your website.
And we believe that is fairly true. We believe that the house dates from the 1860s. We do not know the exact date from when it was constructed. We do have photographic documentation of it being there in the 1860s. So we know it was there by the 1860s. And there are several other homes of that era, like in Tumwater, the Crosby House, for example, that are from that same period. But in terms of Olympia itself, and it's definitely one of the oldest homes that survive in the area.
Well, we have a picture of it right here.
Yes.
Now. This is from 1905, I believe, is what it said on your website, or maybe it was on your Facebook page.
But the Bigelow family.
That's the
front.
Bigelow family, and that's the house. And does it look like this now, or is it looking a little different these days?
It looks very similar to that today. By the way, we believe it to be the oldest house in Olympia. I'm not sure we can prove that beyond a reasonable doubt because we don't know exactly the year it was built, but we don't know of any contender, at least in the city of Olympia, that Greg mentioned the Crosby House in Tumwater, which would be close, but that's in a different city, and it's about our age, or maybe a little bit younger. But
in normal times, you have tours there.
Yes, we do. We do have some displays there, but we are trying to restore it to various periods of the Bigelow family occupancy during the house. So it's really interesting to say that there were 4 generations of the Bigelow family that lived in the house from its construction in the 1860s until the Bigelow family sold it to the Bigelow House Preservation Association in the 1990s with a life estate. That was of the 3rd generation, Daniel and Mary Ann Bigelow, who sold it to the BHPA for a life estate there. And of course, their children left, are no longer living there, of course, but they are still in the community and very much involved and engaged with us in interpreting and preservation of the house.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, it's really wonderful.
And there was a lot of family heirlooms up in the attic and things, and you just recently kind of went through all those. Some of them went back to the family, but others are part of the museum, I would imagine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. A collection that we're adding to our collections, and eventually the goal is to use those in displays and for interpretive purposes.
Oh my gosh, your website is such a gem.
Thank you.
I was perusing it.
Great.
Olympiahistory.org. It is a great research tool to just find things out about our area. And you have things like cataloged in various ways. You can research just pioneers like Rebecca Howard, like
Yes.
George Bush, and all these,
Right.
historical people from Olympia area.
Well,
and then you've got
the,
images.
The fact is that the original Daniel Bigelow, he was a very significant person in the community, as was his spouse. He was a member of the territorial legislature. They were very active in women's suffrage issues. They favored women having the right to vote. They believed in temperance. They didn't favor the consumption of alcohol. And in fact, when we acquired the house, that was one of the provisions that we had to agree to, and we did that happily, that alcohol would never be served in the Bigelow House. And we've adhered to that ever since.
Oh, yes.
But, and they were also very, they were abolitionists. They believed in ending slavery. And so these were significant people in our community at that time, and as was the other members of the family in years that followed.
Well, they had a really famous guest show up for dinner or attend dinner at the house, Susan B. Anthony.
1871, I believe. And she addressed the territory. We were still the territory of Washington in 1871. We didn't become a state till 1889. And she did address the territorial legislature, I believe, and arguing for women having the right to vote. Unfortunately for her, Washington didn't accord women the right to vote until 1910, but she planted the seeds, or helped the seeds grow for women having the right to vote.
Well, thank God that happened.
So I think it's really exciting, and it's a real special privilege and honor for us to be able to preserve that heritage that we had. We had at the Bigelow House a person of national significance then, and remains today, came to the house, and she has a very, very eloquent kind of recollection of that in her diary of visiting the Bigelow House and having dinner there. So,
oh, nice. Okay.
So yeah, so that's it's a very special and important aspect of our history that we are really privileged and are honored to be able to preserve and interpret for the community.
Greg, you have a book on your lap here.
Yes, I just
Water,
happen to have a
Woods, and
book.
Prairies. This is another project
So, yes.
that you guys are promoting. And tell us a little bit about this local history book.
Well, this is a book that is courtesy of the Thurston County Historical Commission. So credit goes to the Historical Commission for coming up with the idea of publishing this updated history of Thurston County history. Sandy Kroll of the commission and the other editor, Shirley Sterling, really put together this wonderful publication on Thurston County history that was just released at the end of 2019. And it's a compilation of historical essays on various themes of local history, and Gerry, of course, is one of the authors of those essays. Shanna Stevenson, another one of our board members and noted author and historian, provided several of the chapters, as well as other historians, Dr. James Hannum, Jennifer and Drew Crooks, with an introduction by David Nicandri. So anyway, it's a really great publication that we have been engaged with the Thurston County Board of Commissioners in selling and distributing to our colleagues and peers across the county, our fellow heritage organizations. So it's well illustrated, lots of wonderful photographs. As you can see, just one example. But so we are selling it, as well as our other partners in the region, to our community.
Yes. The first edition of it sold like hotcakes. I mean, it went fast. Our society was involved and had major involvement in the sale of it, and this is the second printing, and I suspect it's going to go just as quickly as did the first edition. I feel very privileged to have been a contributor to this. My chapter is on, I'm history buff with particular emphasis on legal history, and I wrote a chapter on legal battles to save the state capital for Olympia. Well, I shouldn't say just the state capital, the territorial and state capital for Olympia. It's always been the capital, even from
Even when it was just a territory.
from the very roots of our
Gotcha.
of Washington when we became the territory of Washington in 1853. But there have been efforts to move the capital from time to time, but Olympia has always prevailed and kept it here.
Well, good.
So that's chapter 9, the battle for the capital.
Yeah.
So read it here,
Cool.
as well as other really very well-written and insightful and well-documented research.
Now, people, if they want to get their hands on that
Yeah.
book, they can go to your website.
You can go to our website, right.
OlympiaHistory.org. And you lay out places that are selling it, but can you just order it online as well?
You can order online, yes.
Now, a next project that you're doing, that you're starting to work on now, is preserving the history of the armory that the
Exactly.
city of Olympia bought, and they're going to turn it into an art space or a creative space. And so which one, Gary, you want to tell me a little bit about that process, what you are doing to preserve those memories?
Well, I think Greg could talk a little bit about the process, the project we have to provide a history of it. I could give you some personal memories of the Armory really from a child's eyes. I attended many events there. Maybe Greg can say a word first about what we're doing in order to help
I'll give you a little bit of
compile
context
a history
about
of it.
And we have an image of the Armory here. This is like on the east side of downtown, correct? And
Correct.
so I don't know when this picture was taken.
It's a handsome building. It still is to this
Looks
day.
the same as this,
Yeah.
doesn't it?
Looks very
Yeah.
same.
Art
Looks very
Deco
similar.
style. That would,
So, Robert, yes, probably many people know that the Washington National Guard, headquartered at Camp Murray, is transitioning from their local station from here, where they currently are, to their new readiness center in Tumwater. So as a result of that transition, they were going to be selling the building to any person who might want to take the building and do whatever they wanted to with it. There were many people in the community who felt it was important that the Armory remain in public hands. And so there was an effort initiated that transitioned the building from ownership from the National Guard to the City of Olympia, as you say, for a creative arts campus. So part of that transition, we have been working with the National Guard Bureau to document the history before it is transitioned, because it has such significance to the community. Not only is it is a wonderful architectural gem, but also it has great historical significance to the community. And as Gary pointed out earlier, it was really not just a drill hall, a place for recruiting and practicing, but it was also a community center. It was used for many different purposes by many different organizations and entities. And Gary has great stories and recollections himself of that participation. So why don't you?
Well, I've lived in Olympia since 1942, and I remember even as a child, it was a place for National Guardsmen and later Guardswomen to train, but at the same time it served a function as a community center for large events like auto shows. Some people, some of our viewers may have seen an article in the Olympian on this past Sunday showing that there was a dog show there at the Armory in 1958. I can remember attending basketball games there, St. Martin's College, before they built their beautiful new gymnasium they have out there now on the campus. They had just a small gym on the campus. They used to play their home games in the Armory. It's got a large drilling area which served as a basketball court. Another thing I remember very well were they used to have professional wrestling matches there, which they used to call wrestling. College wrestling is wrestling, Olympic wrestling, but professional wrestling is wrestling, and it's athletic, but it's show business too, and they got good crowds for pro wrestling there. But as I say, they also had basketball, dog shows, several inauguration balls for
festivals.
governors, where my father emceed, was master of ceremonies for one of the inaugural balls in the 40s. And so it was a great community center. We need something similar to that today, and I'm hopeful that the city will see the need to develop something similar in that building today.
Those are the kinds of stories and recollections that we're really trying to elicit from folks in terms of their memories of their being at the Armory, whether it was for wrestling matches or for dog shows or for drilling.
Car shows, right?
And so we're calling it our Armory Storytelling Project.
Okay.
So we are looking to the community to get those kinds of stories like Gary just told of what, their involvement there, whether it was, going to an inaugural ball or a basketball game or drilling. So we have a website off of our webpage where people can go and just send us an email or fill out a form that gives us their recollections and attach a photograph if they have any photos of when they were there or being there or seeing an event there or whatever. So we want to record those memories and keep those, as the building transitions to a new use, and hopefully rehabilitation preservation for a long time. That we can keep those memories intact, and they will be housed at the state archives as well for people to access those recollections.
So the website is olympiaarmory.org.
Correct. Thank you.
And there's a form that
Correct.
people can fill out, and they can upload their images if they have pictures from events there, or just put their stories in there, right? They can also call 253-512-8469 or email olyhistory@gmail.com, and then they can share images with the hashtag Olympia Armory Story.
Correct.
So if they're just sharing stuff on their social media, use that hashtag.
Great. Thank you very much for filling those details. And that phone number would be at Camp Murray at the Washington Military Department staff.
Okay.
So yes.
It reminds me of the old Tumwater Club. I've heard stories of the Tumwater Club that the Schmidt family built for their Olympia Brewery employees, and they had balls and basketball and stuff like that. Just a big building in Tumwater.
I remember that building.
Yeah.
I was out
there. You go.
Out there in. I think it finally burned down. A lot of those old,
it did. It burned down.
I think we thought of it as a dance hall, but
dances. They had dances, right?
All those old dance halls. There was the Evergreen Ballroom and that one in Tumwater. They all ended up burning down. They were wooden buildings, but.
Well,
I do remember that building, though.
Did they have dances at the Armory?
I don't know. One thing about the floor, I do remember this. A basketball court with a maple floor, it has a certain amount of give and bounce to it. The floor in the Armory there it's wooden blocks because they marched in there and did drilling and stuff, and it didn't have a lot of give. I think it was tough on the basketball players' legs, in a full collegiate game there. But it's it's an indestructible floor, I think.
Yeah. Well, hopefully when they develop the Armory into whatever it becomes, they have some history, on the walls and stuff, and share some of the stories and some of the pictures. So the deadline for this project for people to submit is the end of March.
Correct.
So
Correct.
By March 31st, you want to get to that website and put your images, put your stories in.
Correct.
So that we can preserve those. And then you'll be making a video, right?
Right. We'll be interviewing selected participants, including Justice Alexander as one of the interviewees, as well as you say, we'll be developing an interpretive display at some point there that will be at the building, so people can sort of keep that essence of what the building was like and how it was used. So I would say, Robert, that the military department has been a great partner with us in this. The City of Olympia as well. The East Side Neighborhood Association, State Archives, and the Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation have been working to get this, pull this together, and so that we retain those memories as the building enters a new era.
Great. Well, excellent. Thanks for doing this. We're running out of time on this program, but I wanted to go to each of you and ask if there's anything we didn't get a chance to talk about, or maybe what the future might hold, maybe some of your goals for your organization. Let's start with you, Gary.
You know, I was thinking this morning about memories of the Armory, and I don't know how interesting this is. You can leave it on the cutting room floor if it's not, but during the war, the big war, World War II, the Washington National Guard was federalized. They went into federal service. But states were allowed to have what they called state guards. They were a state militia composed of men who were too old to be drafted or for some reason might be exempt from the draft. My father was in his late 30s and had 3 children, so he was exempt from the draft for at least in the first part of the war. And he went into the state guard, and they trained up at the museum there. And I can remember my dad getting dressed up in his uniform, which it was a little different. It was a state uniform rather than a federal uniform, and go up to once a week to the, these older men were to be the last line of defense if the war ever came to the American shores. Fortunately, it never did, so we never have to find out how well these old men would have done against the Japanese army or the German army. But I do have very remembrances of that, but didn't really think about it until this morning as I was planning to come over here. So.
Yeah, I had not heard that story.
Yeah, it was the Washington State Guard, and there is provision for that for a state militia, which kind of takes the place of the National Guard, which can be federalized during wartime, which the Washington National Guard was.
Interesting. That's good.
And Greg, is there anything that you wanted to bring up before we go?
Well, Robert, I guess I would say that there's a lot ahead for us in terms of challenges and what the future holds. Like all sorts of nonprofit organizations, funding and sustaining our operations is always a challenge, and particularly during the pandemic. So we have, for 2 years in a row, we have not been able to have our annual holiday home tour, which has always been a success and was our biggest fundraiser each year. So we're challenged in that regard, sustaining our operations. We are fortunate that we do have kind of a stable membership base that has been very dependable in terms of not only financial support, but also docenting and helping us out when needed, and volunteers. But being able to sustain our funding base is going to be a challenge, getting through the pandemic and sustaining that. As many of you know who have historic properties, or any kind of properties, it maintains constant maintenance and repairs, and that's something that's going to be an ongoing responsibility for us. And we take it very seriously to preserve the architectural and historical character of the Bigelow House. That's one of our charges as owning historic property as significant as the Bigelow House is. So that is an ongoing challenge, and we've been blessed with getting both public and private support for doing projects to maintain and rehabilitate and preserve the building, but we also need ongoing work such as roof repairs and foundation and painting, and as well as the grounds. Our property also has significance as well. Yeah. So we need to pay attention in terms of how we're going to use that for interpreting the house and local history, as well as other kinds of ways that we want to interpret the house, because we are kind of very much aware that the public's kind of expectations are changing in terms of how they appreciate, how they enjoy our history and the historic places that sort of embody what our history is about. So we want to really give a lot of thought and effort into how we can open up the house, but also interpret it in new ways that are being challenged to us by technology and kind of expectations in terms of what people are thinking in terms of what our history is, and that wide spectrum of what our history is.
So you weren't able to do tours because of COVID. So
Correct.
And you do charge a small admission, not very much.
We
And
did, yes.
So that you're missing out on that money. But also people should go and become a member or
Correct.
donate, and they can do that through your website, right? And
Right.
I saw that membership was like $35. Is that right?
Well, there's different categories of membership.
All right.
Yeah.
Maybe that was the first
It's
option.
a single, yes.
Okay, right on. So they should go to olympiahistory.org and donate, become a member, and just find out, just peruse those resources. that
Fortunately,
have
we were
there.
able, even though our income has been down a bit because of the our not having to have our big fundraiser, we've managed to really do a lot of work on the house through grants that we've obtained, and so the house is, I think it's in really fine fettle right now. It's probably as good a shape as it's ever been in, or for at least for a long time. So I'm
So once you
really
can-
pleased about that, because that's our solemn responsibility to keep that house
Yeah.
looking good.
Yeah, but it's going to be a prize for anybody those first people that come in, because it's going to look really sharp. And
It is.
once you can do tours
Yeah,
again.
it's going to look really great. Yeah.
We have been benefited by several generous grants, including a great grant that we received from the state legislature to do painting, which we're
Yeah.
going to be doing this coming summer. But we have challenges ahead, and I think another kind of long-range vision that we have is really raising the profile of the Historical Society, as well as history in our community. We feel that we really need to have a greater presence in terms of who we are and the broad spectrum of our history, and we're looking to work on establishing an Arts and Heritage Center at the former Old City Hall Fire Station downtown, in alliance with the Arts and Heritage Alliance. So that's something that we're really kind of focusing, kind of a long-term vision of ours, is to have that kind of a presence downtown for a place for the community, the city, visitors to understand the full spectrum of our heritage, a place to see exhibits, lectures, view our collections, as well as interpret our history, our state history as territorial capital, state capital, but also Native American history as well.
I would argue that Olympia is the most historic city in the state of Washington. We've been the capital since 1853, and yet we have no city museum. Almost every city in the state, including little ones in Thurston County, Tenino, Shelton next door, in Mason County, Lacey, which is not a small city anymore, but they all have museums. But Olympia has none. We had the State Capitol Museum up until a few years ago, which some people kind of considered Olympia's museum, but it was really devoted to the history of state government, and it's no longer in existence. The building is still there, but the museum is not. And we badly need a city history museum so people can learn about the rich history of this place.
Well, thanks for preserving our history.
So that's a real major charge that we have, and that we want to look forward to. And so we're really giving a lot of thought in terms of how to bring that about, because we really think it's important to bring those stories to the public, and we feel like downtown is really the best place to do that, and an historic place at that. So
we have to leave it there.
Oh, okay.
That's all we have for you. Please visit their website at olympiahistory.org. You can also find them on Facebook at Oli History. If you want to submit photos or stories to the Olympia Armory Storytelling Project, visit olympiaarmory.org or call 253-512-8469. See you next time.
Support for Mission Nonprofit is provided by Thurston Talk.
This program is provided in the public interest by Thurston Community Media. More information at TCMedia.org.